The fact that House Republicans are threatening a shutdown and demanding, in exchange for keeping the government open, the enactment of deeply dangerous and unpopular parts of Trump's Project 2025 agenda is unserious and unacceptable.
The unserious and unacceptable provision is about voter ID to prevent non-citizen voting, which is not a thing. And the White House has already said it will veto such a bill. Quote, the Republican provision will make it much harder for all eligible Americans to register to vote and increase the risk that eligible voters are purged from voter rolls. This legislation is unnecessary. It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. It is a federal crime punishable by prison and fines. This behavior is wrong, and the law clearly prohibits it. States already have effective safeguards in place to verify voters' eligibility and maintain the accuracy of voter rolls, end quote. Let's be clear. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election because 7 million more people voted for President Biden, and enough of those people lived in battleground states. It wasn't a close election. And it's not because of made-up voter fraud. It's not because of non-citizens voting in the election. But the vitriol and disinformation about the 2020 election has been memed into reality in the confidence of voters. New polls released today by CNN reveal that only one swing state, Wisconsin, has a majority of voters who say they're very confident about the accuracy of their state's voting process. The constant repetition of Republican conspiracy theories and the political theater of unnecessary and unjustified recounts by folks like the cyber ninjas has succeeded in sowing doubt in voters' minds. The 2020 election was, in fact, empirically the most secure and safest election in modern history. Now, here's the other problem. There are only 9 legislative days left on the calendar before a federal government shutdown. But Republicans are willing to shut down federal services and destabilize the country in pursuit of a xenophobic and racist agenda. Also, Donald Trump doesn't have to face the fact that he's a loser and might actually be a loser yet again in November. Joining us now is the Democratic Congressman Joe Neguse of Colorado. He's the House Assistant Democratic Leader. And I always enjoy talking to you, Congressman, but I'm actually confused tonight about what to talk about. Do we talk about the fact that the government could shut down, or do we talk about this BS about non-citizens voting? It is statistically not a thing that happens in this country.
Well, good evening, Ali. It's good to be with you. Perhaps we could talk about both. I guess I would first just say, with respect to the former, as you said, it is already illegal under federal law. It is a crime, of course, for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. And for all the reasons that you stated, and of course the reasons that Leader Jeffries so eloquently articulated, we know that House Republicans are engaged in a political charade. It is unfortunately a dangerous game in which they have taken government funding hostage to pursue an extreme and extremely partisan continuing resolution that ultimately would harm not just, of course, our nation's veterans and veterans health care, a wide variety of critically important programs, but as you said, also seeks to implement Trump's Project 2025 inspired idea with respect to this particular provision that you've described. I think that the American people are tired of it. They'd like to see House Republicans work in good faith with House Democrats on a bipartisan path forward that funds the government, which we have certainly tried to do time and time again. But as you know, House Republicans' currency, this Congress, has been chaos and dysfunction. And this particular continuing resolution and the bill that you mentioned is, of course, consistent with that approach.
In this weird service of Donald Trump, because when you think about the border, for people in Colorado, it's an issue. It's an issue for a lot of people. There was a bill. There was a bill that a lot of Democrats didn't like and a lot of Republicans didn't like, but people came together to create a bill. And Donald Trump's xenophobic nonsense and the fact that he didn't want to solve a problem killed that bill. Government shutdowns used to be rare. They used to be a rare thing, and they were often done because something really important was holding them up. This is a nonsensical bill that doesn't need to pass.
Yeah, I agree on both fronts, Ali. I would say with respect to your first point, that the dangerous and offensive rhetoric that the former president has been engaged in, I agree, largely obfuscates away from what he doesn't want to talk about, which is that ultimately, at his behest, Republicans killed a bipartisan border security deal that would have addressed and ameliorated many of the challenges on our southern border. And of course, as you said, House Republicans have now made threatening government shutdowns a mainstay of their approach to government, unfortunately, and it has dangerous consequences for the American people. I think that, as I said, the American people are tired of it. It's one of the reasons why the message that Vice President Harris has been articulating, in my view, is resonating so deeply with the American people. But it's time for the House Republicans to get serious, and they've got to work with us to get a continuing resolution funded.
I don't mean to debase this conversation by bringing up this other nonsense that we were talking about earlier, but you are the child of immigrants. As you know, I'm an immigrant to this country. This stuff that Donald Trump started on, it was remarkable to watch a national presidential debate in America. I can't imagine what people in the rest of the world were thinking, where one of the candidates was discussing people eating pets. But it is actually racist. It's really dangerous. It's not, as Mike DeWine says, from the internet. It's a weird conspiracy theory that the guy who wants to be president of the United States is promulgating.
Ali, I'd say this. So 40 years ago, there was a previous president who made a speech on the second to last day of their presidency. And that speech talked about the importance of immigrants, and in particular, the fact that our country's status as a beacon of freedom and opportunity to the world is one of the core parts of America's greatness. That president was a Republican. It was Ronald Reagan in a speech that's become memorable over the course of the ensuing decades. And it gives you a sense of just how far, unfortunately, the Republican Party writ large, of course, led by former President Trump and so many of his sycophants, have gone away from some of the norms that used to be considered sacrosanct in our country. I find it, of course, deeply offensive, as do you. But the good news is, Ali, that I think the vast majority of Americans do, too. And they are not interested in the divisive rhetoric that former President Trump has spotlighted and has engaged in for the better part of the last 9 years. They want something different. They want a new way forward. They want an optimistic and hopeful vision for the country that's inclusive. And that's exactly what Vice President Harris and House Democrats have been offering to the American public. So I'm optimistic about the road ahead, notwithstanding the rhetoric that he has been engaged in over the course of the last few days.
Congressman, always good to talk to you. Thank you for being with us this evening. Congressman Joe Neguse.